We made it a whole 532 days, but at long last, we have new Game of Thrones content to discuss here on the channel. Welcome, everybody, to our episode 1 review of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms here on House of the Empire. We've got some other really great Game of Thrones related content as well, plus a confirmation of some stuff that we had talked about on our previous episode. It should be a lot of fun, but the most fun to be had, I think, is going to be delving back into the world of Westeros for the first time since 2024. I'm Zach. I'm joined by a host of other Thrones enthusiasts that have a lot of experience with the show, either from day one or kind of jumping in the middle, like I did. It's going to be really interesting to take a look at the scope of this show being a lot smaller than what we're used to, and seeing if perhaps it affects the quality. Time will tell. And all of that is going to be on tonight's episode. Over to my side here on this upper panel, it's my co-host and my buddy Sean. Dude, it's so good to be talking new Thrones content for the first time in a while.
Go to Johnny first. I'm having audio issues now too. Unbelievable. Sorry, Zach.
Oh boy. We had some technical difficulties before the show started, and now we're getting it in show. That's okay. Johnny, same question, same presentation. Thrones is back for the first time since August of 2024, and it's fun to finally be delving back into that world again.
I am interested to talk about this. I'll say that. I don't want to give too much away for what sort of things I'm going to have to say later on. I don't want to jump the shark, as it were. So, I don't want to say much, which I think says a lot. But I'll leave you with that tantalizing thought. Say I'm happy. I'm excited to talk about it. And break it down from more perspectives than just my own. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had a couple of messages from people who are like passive Thrones enthusiasts try to get my thoughts on it. And I was like, you know what? It's going to be on a podcast tonight. So why don't you just tune into the podcast? um, Randy, you were with us for the House of the Dragon discussion. How's it feel to be back, but doing it for a different show and a different scope?
So it's interesting because am I still muted? Because I know Sean had. There we go. It's interesting. I actually kind of didn't know what to expect, but I know we'll get into it. But it's exciting to get into something that looks and feels like Game of Thrones, but is very different. And I watched it literally before we got on here, just so it was fresh in my mind, and I was really pretty happy with what I saw.
It's good to hear. Sean, it sounds like you're good to go again. How are you feeling after this initial episode?
So like I had like this roller coaster journey to the episode, right? Like if you remember our last Westeros discussion that we had based off of new content that was released, Zach and I kind of went scorched earth on the season finale of House of the Dragon season 2, despite us both really liking the show. I specifically, in fact, when you were doing that, you mentioned how many days it's been. I immediately remembered exactly where I was, exactly what I was doing while we recorded that episode. And I was not sitting, I was pacing, I was pissed off. So this was not my first want for another show. I felt like there was a lot of other places they could have gone first. I have not read the novellas at all. I believe Zach's the only one here that has. Johnny may have. I'm not sure, but Zach, I know has read them.
The first one.
The first one. specifically. Look, this is what I'll say off the top. First 10 minutes, I was a little worried. The second 10 minutes, I was starting to ease into it a bit. And the back half of the episode, spoiler alert, won me over.
So it grew on you, is what you're meaning to say.
Yeah, it took time though. I was a little worried.
I get it. I get it. Um, the opening episode is titled The Hedge Knight, and we'll get into the concept of hedge knights and how it was brought about in the episode in just a moment. Directed by Owen Harris, written by Ira Parker. The viewership numbers have not officially been announced yet, but essentially, as we came to discover, thanks to the lovely ladies of the night that were hanging out outside someone's tent, we got some exposition on what a hedge knight is and what their purpose is, and it's kind of interesting that everything we have seen previously has to do with the upper elite of noble houses and those names meaning something to the region and to the realm. And now the star of our show has no last name, has no house affiliation, has no legacy, which has been a word that we've used quite a bit here on the channel. He doesn't have any of that, and yet he's been made into the star. Um, Johnny, what do you make of the concept of hedge knights in general, and then the idea of following one as the main protagonist?
Well, I mean, it makes sense, to a degree, sort of having that delineation between, types of knights, right? Like, you just sort of you hear the phrase and then you just sort of lump them all in together. Where now we're sort of getting that peek behind the curtain that of the politics within that hierarchy, which is something we don't really, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head that has really sort of gone into that. Um, which is one of the things I'm sort of most interested in with this, especially with knowing the players. Like, I haven't read this particular novella, but I mean, obviously, I know the players. Um, so, like, you sort of get this idea of how this story is going to play out, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Knowing who these people are in the future and the journey to get there from where they're starting. Is very interesting because it's the most interesting part to me anyway, is getting to where we're going and where's the ending point, how far into their story are we going to get, how much of it are we going to get to see, is interesting to me. And I'm excited to see more of that, political strife at this level, because even through this first episode, we really didn't get much out of it in that regard. So it's going to be fun, to see a knight with no knighthood, with no known knighthood. It's going to be a fun ride. I think that's the one part of the story I'm honestly most excited to see play out in the next few episodes.
It's really interesting being somebody who's read the source material and kind of tracking the direction that they're taking it. Randy, have you done any boning up on this series, or are you flying blind? How much do you know about our characters and how much got revealed to you here in this pilot?
So I have this thing about with any IP. So like I did this with Harry Potter. I've done it with Game of Thrones, things like that. I've stayed away from the source material just because I want it to be new and fresh to me. Obviously, like with as an example with Harry Potter, I went back and read the books after to get everything they cut out and get the little bits of things that that I essentially missed that actually kind of helped with some of the characters. And I feel like that's going to happen when I actually finally sit down and read Game of Thrones and things like that. Whereas so that's why I'm just like with this, I just want to come in fresh eyes, get a feel for the characters and kind of where things are going. Obviously, some of this at points almost kind of feels like a Knight's Tale to some degree, just because basically a nobody trying to become a somebody without having really any backing whatsoever. So it's going to be an interesting series. I like the tone of it. I like how it's different than what we've been getting. Uh, and I'm really curious to kind of see the dynamic with the different forms of a knight and the terms and learning all this new stuff, because I honestly had never heard of a hedge knight before. So it's interesting that I'm going to get to see just how much politicking goes into all this, because let's be honest, anything you've heard, the tales, even in history, when it comes to knights, there's always some form of that. Whereas obviously in a fantasy realm, it's going to be a little more fantastic, so to speak. Uh,
Mhm.
but I like it. Like I said, I like it so far. I'm really curious to see how the character grows through the first season and how he develops into a true knight versus what he's starting as.
Yeah, and uh, it'll have to happen within the next couple of hours worth of content, because each episode is going to be around a half an hour in length moving forward. This one was probably in the ballpark of about 42, but everything else is going to be below 35, as I understand it, moving forward. And so it's not the traditional length that we're used to from Game of Thrones, and it's not the traditional storytelling that we're used to from Game of Thrones. Sean, does that affect your way of viewing this show? Is like having this knowledge that things are going to be more condensed, that things are going to be lower budget, that things are going to be different than what we've seen in Westeros before? Does that affect your approach to watching it?
Initially, I was concerned. I know you and I talked privately about it. Like Game of Thrones offers three things, in my opinion. When I say Game of Thrones, I mean Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, etc.
Mhm.
One is great storytelling, depth, layered, and exceptional character development. Two is it makes you feel immersed in the world as if you were actually there viewing the events. And three is the production value that makes it feel like a real lived in place.
Mhm.
And early on in this episode, I was a little concerned, man. But like I said, it won me over in the back half of the episode. And I'm not too worried about, like, initially I was worried about time constraints, right? One, only 6 episodes, but to my understanding, there's so little material available in the first novella that even with this show, they are having to add scenes that don't exist there in order to stretch it out. So as long as the focus, I'm not saying you can't have a scene with a character that is not Dunk or Egg, but I'm trying to recall, I don't think we had a scene in this first episode that wasn't with one of the two, to my knowledge. Um, so if that's the way they're going to tell this story, if that's the lens they're telling it through, I think the rest of them are between 31 and 37 minutes. It's probably enough if that's how they're gonna do the storytelling. But if we start hopping around to a bunch of different characters and they're not in scenes and we're trying to follow their stories, other characters' stories outside of Dunk and Egg, which you will to some extent, but we should be learning about these characters, much like in the first episode, through their lens and not moving the lens off in another direction like they do in the other two series. If it stays as that, I'm actually not worried, which shocks me to say because you know how I feel about short episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. The novella, at least the copy that I have, is fully illustrated with 118 pages. So it's not even 118 pages if you count for all of the illustrations that are thrown into the novella as well. Maybe 110, if that. But even if we're stretching it to the full 118, that means, dividing 118 by 6, I think it came out to about 19 and a half pages per episode. Um, And so it's going to be interesting to see how much deviating they do, considering how quote unquote little source material there may be to go off of. But like you said, as long as it's from a single POV and you're not jumping around and feeling lost in the story the way you would with an hour-long Thrones episode, um, then perhaps it can work. Um, Johnny, how do you feel about a show being from like a first-person POV instead of the traditional storytelling style that we're used to in Westeros?
I don't, inherently have any issues with it, as long as they stick to it, and
Mhm.
like Sean said, I don't want this to sort of rove and wander off the point. Um, I think that's a very important thing, is that if you're going to tell this story through their lens and strictly through their lens, then it's fine that you're not, you don't need as much time, 30 plus minutes of just those two characters from their perspective and their events and things like that, I think is fine. As long as you stick with that structurally. Like Sean said, if you start going off and, telling stories from other characters that aren't necessary to the plot of what's going on with Duncan Egg, then you lose a lot of that, you know. So it's just going to come down to execution, and for the first episode, I think they did a fairly good job of that. Because you're right, I can't. I finished the episode myself about an hour ago. I don't remember anything that I don't remember any shots that didn't include one of the two characters. So I'm okay with that, as long as they stick to that and stick to the point and keep the story moving forward. I think, and this is just a me thing, I think there were definitely some parts in this first episode that I could have done without. Um, Definitely a few specific moments where I was like, I don't need this in my life.
Oh, come on, you didn't want Dunk taking a shit?
I literally paused it at that moment and said, and literally this was my response, if we were not reviewing this, I'd be done right there. I'd have just given up right there, because it was so, like, at least in other properties, like, House of the Dragon, you had your gratuitousness in that first episode, but it was plot relevant gratuitousness. That was completely unnecessary to anything. Like, I mean, it sort of set the tone for what the episode was going to be, sort of bouncing back and forth between that joviality and seriousness, which is going to be a very fine tightrope they're going to have to walk the rest of the way. Because I definitely felt there were points where they leaned too far one way at points, but we'll get into the specifics as we go. But it's, as long as you stick to the point and you don't veer off often. Like, if that's the moment we look back on in the season and go, man, that was the worst thing, it's not that awful. But it's a tightrope that I don't want to say I'm afraid of going forward, but it set the bar in an unwelcome place for me in the first 5 minutes. I'll say.
Well,
Can I cut in here for a quick second, just on this specific point?
Mm-hmm.
So Jade and I were both eating when we watched the episode.
Oh.
And that's
Oh.
seeing crap like that, pun intended, is a real big turnoff for me.
A turd off?
Yeah, it basically killed my appetite. Set your recorders here. I completely agree with Johnny on this one. I know, shocking. But what really worries me here is, unlike the fake news Lucasfilm, internal civil war that all the fucking grifters would report on, Zach, I think you can back me up on this one. A little later, we're going to talk about an actual Westeros civil war that is actively happening at HBO as we speak, and there's nothing fake about it, because a certain someone can't keep his mouth shut. So, Zach, I want to pose a question to you. You're always the one posing questions to us. I want your 2 cents on this. It was said the reason that this show does not have the Game of Thrones theme is George R. R. Martin requested it to not have the Game of Thrones theme. He has very publicly stated some things that we'll get into later about David and Dan and now Ryan Condal on House of the Dragon. I can't help but had that shit come up anywhere else in the episode, it would have been even at the beginning. But the fact that it immediately followed like 10 or 15 seconds of the Game of Thrones theme felt like George R. R. Martin, who's more hands-on with this series than the other two, his middle finger to Condal, David, and Dan. That is genuinely how I felt, and it brought me back to a place with a movie that we were going to talk about tonight, but we'll talk about it next week. It reminded me of the Luke Skywalker tossing the lightsaber over his shoulder thing in The Last Jedi. Basically, Rian Johnson's "fuck you" to J.J. Abrams. Childish. That's truly 100% how I feel about it, and how I truly, or why I truly feel it was done, which does bother me a bit.
So, is there a question involved in this?
Do you think I'm nuts, or do you think there's something to it, given everything we've talked about?
You just made a statement. You're like, Zach, I'm going to pose a question to you, and then you just go off on a 2-minute tangent about Martin. And
I know, and I said, be careful.
And don't pose a
tangents
question
today,
to me. Like, what's the question?
That's a pretty shitty question.
Yeah, it was. It was very turdy. No, do you think there could be something to that? I truly think there is. People in Hollywood are petty.
I think that is true. I think Martin definitely has his immaturities, and that is blatantly obvious with his Instagram posts, his website, the public comments that he makes. I saw the little making of. It was only like 5 or 6 minutes, but it was like a little.
There's a longer one that's 18 minutes, just so you know.
Oh well, they didn't have that posted when we finished the episode Sunday night, so the one that we watched was only 6 minutes. But in that they show that scene, and the director Owen Harris just kind of laughs it off, and he's like, "Oh yeah, hopefully they forgive us for that," or something like that. Like, he was in on it. Like, it wasn't just a Martin decision. Like, obviously they had to write it, they had to act it out, they had to direct it. Like, this was a collaborative thing. And so while there's definitely that possibility of being, undertoning it with the music and shitting on past creatives, as it were, I think it's also one of those tonal duplicities, like what was mentioned a moment ago. Is, you have this big inspirational moment, and then you couple it with a joke right after, and that's essentially what the entire episode was. There were moments of seriousness where he is trying to sign up for a tournament, and then when he leaves the room, he bonks his head on the door frame. Like, slapstick comedy, I guess. And then later on, when he's in Sir Lionel's tent, he doesn't know how to behave, and he's trying to use whatever mannerisms and politeness he has. But then at the end of the day, Lionel's like, "Why the fuck are you in my tent?" And he says, "For supper." So, like, there's these moments of seriousness coupled with moments of brevity that happen through the whole episode. But that one is probably the most egregious. I would agree to that. So, Dustin made a comment earlier about Game of Porcelain Thrones, and it reminded me, none of y'all are going to get this reference. Maybe some people down south will get it, if there's anybody south of Tennessee that's tuning in. But there is a very popular, up and coming, growing gas station chain around here called Buc-ee's. And I don't know how far north they've made it, but
Oh, Virginia's getting their own Bucky's.
They're getting one?
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And they love to make very pun-filled signs that can be over 100 miles away from their destination in order to start enticing you to stop off there on your road trip. And there's one on a highway between here and San Antonio that's for a stop off. It's like right in the midpoint. And the sign says, "No games, just thrones." Because they are known for having some of the cleanest toilets you'll ever see on a road trip. And so when he said Game of Porcelain Thrones, it made me think of Bucky's. Thank you, Dustin. Now I'm craving beaver nuggets.
I yearn for fresh biscuit.
We have touched on a couple of spoilers, so we'll go ahead and get into a more formal spoilery territory here as we take a look at the entirety of this episode. Um, Sean, this is the part of the episode that you were kind of on the fence about the most was Dunk, as he calls himself, being in the care of his deceased lord, his deceased knight that he's serving. And he decides to hold on to the sword, the shield, and the three horses, and makes his way to an inn. That's where shit hits the fan, literally. But it's also where he takes it upon himself to try to do something with his life. And he had a few different ideas and finally settles on the tourney at Ashford and makes his way to the inn. Um, what was it in particular, I'm curious, that was off-putting about that first little bit of the episode? Or was it another sequence like something that happened at the inn? Like what part of that early stage of the episode was it that was off to you?
I would say it's basically everything up until the inn, which is about 10 minutes, where um, I we don't have time for me to get into every detail, but I thought that was the weakest acted portion of the episode uh, by Peter, the guy playing Dunk. Um, some weird camera shots that, like the lingering one when he's over the grave there that he built, or he's building the grave. It just it didn't feel very Game of Thrones the first 10 minutes, which is interesting because when you watch the 18-minute um, making of the episode, they talk about how yeah they're trying to do something different, but it still needs to feel like Westeros. And I didn't think the first 10 minutes did, but once they basically got to the inn, kind of reminded me of some scenes with Arya and the Hound when they're at forget where it is, but it turned for me there. But just honestly, the whole thing, man, it wasn't one thing in particular. Like I said, the shit thing kind of bothered me because it's dual reading. Like, one, I'm eating, and two, I mean, my own fault for eating during a Game of Thrones show. But two, I don't like the behind the scenes drama of a franchise I love that there's no debating if it's made up or not. It's very real, and it took me out of it a little bit. But again, by the time they got to the inn and introduced Egg and the interaction between the two, like clearly some instant chemistry between the two actors, it turned around for me. But yeah, it wasn't one thing in particular, man. That's why I was really worried. The whole first 10 minutes was a bit of a miss for me.
Do you feel like he just needs people to play off of? Was it the isolation of him, being in this big, full, rich world and him being alone in it?
Yeah, for sure. Again, that's how I felt at the time. And again, I'm not forgiving all of it, but I would say this is, and I said this to Jade, I'm like, that felt in particular, Duncan, felt like I was anyone who watches everyone Les Raymond or ever did should get this reference. The earlier seasons of the show, Robert Barone is very awkward. And he's probably my favorite character on the show. But the first 2 or 3 seasons, he's really awkward. It doesn't even feel like the same character, and it felt like I was watching Robert Barone getting sucked into Westeros. The first 10 minutes of the episode, but seeing where the episode went and certain scenes that we're going to talk about, I was a lot more okay with it after the fact, but during it, man, I was quite worried. And yes, I do think the seclusion played into it. I think he plays a lot. To me, he seemed like a much stronger actor playing off people than Lone. But maybe that's intentional.
Did you
He's
know?
kind of awkward.
Well, and I'll get to Randy in just a second. Your next question's coming up. I'm sorry, but did you know that he before he was an actor, he was actually a rugby player?
Yeah, they covered that in the making of. But prior to that, no, I had no fucking idea.
Yeah, I still haven't seen the longer making of, so I didn't know that that was something that was covered in it. But it was kind of astounding to see like old sports footage of him talking about the strategy for the upcoming game, and then taking a look at him as a member of Westeros now. That was interesting. Randy, remind me, you haven't read any of the source material, right?
I have not.
You went in blindly. Everybody went in blindly except for me, it seems. That's okay. Would that first sequence have been like, obviously the shit sequence was something that I feel like everybody can agree that they could do without. But everything leading up to the inn, what could or should have been done to clean it up or make it better? Or were you good with it as it was?
So, looking back at it in terms of just my first impressions, I was like, oh, wow, this guy's an idiot. Like, literally just awkward, and basically he's followed the night around this entire time to the point of where he really didn't learn much of anything except for maybe a few things. So like that, if they were going for that, it definitely came through to me in spades. I didn't care about the shit scene. I just thought it was kind of funny because I was just like, I like toilet humor. What can I say? But it was, and obviously, the swell of the music, and then that happens. I was just like, yep, that's exactly kind of sets the tone for pretty much what to expect this entire season for me. But ultimately, I felt like the way everything played out was done intentionally. You were meant to feel awkward the way he felt awkward. I think they did a good job of conveying that. Obviously, once he got to the inn and we got to see him start to play off of people, we got to see more of his personality as he's forcing himself to come out and try to interact with people, considering he's never had to probably do any of it. It's always been someone else talking for him, and he's just kind of like, yes, sir, no, sir, bowing his head, keeping his head down, stuff like that. So ultimately, and I also kind of did like him talking to the horses to try to get himself up to finally try to make something of himself. So I feel like in that aspect, I was fine with it, but I can see where you guys are coming from, especially um, given how the rest of the episode played out versus that first 10 minutes. Yeah, I can see where you guys would have issues with that.
Johnny, was it the opening sequence that you were hesitant about when you were talking about your initial thoughts at the top of the show, or was there something else that was off-putting to you as well?
I mean, it was definitely that that initial little bit was the most off-putting for me. I don't want to say the tonality of the episode was off-putting to me, but it's just like there were other parts throughout it that just felt unnecessary to me. Like, it felt like, and this is sort of jumping ahead in the episode, but it felt like the dancing in the dinner just felt like it went on forever. And I don't want to say it took me out of it, but like it just felt like it kept going and going and going. And like, it kind of got to a point where it was just like, do we need to keep doing this? I feel like we've been at this for 5 minutes. This is you know, is a 40 some minute episode and we're spending, you know, 10% of it dancing in circles. Like, is that necessary?
Hmm.
Like, it just, you know, like that sort of took me out of it in the end. But, you know, to me anyway, personally, this is sort of the things that took me out the most. Like, I didn't like how the tonal shift, and this could just be me, but like it felt like the tonal shifts were shown too intensely in the lighting. Like
Interesting.
it seemed like all of the happy jovial scenes were more bright, and the other ones were much more gray and dark. And to me, like that just felt like a, you know, a hammer on a nail. Like, I'm okay feeling it like in the emotion of the moment. I don't need it directed at me in the lighting of the moment, because it's going to me anyway, it's going to tip off future moments. You know, like if a scene is looking intense, it's going to be gray. If a scene is going to be happy, it's going to be bright. I don't want that obviousness to me. Like, if a big moment is going to sneak up on me, I want it to sneak up on me. I don't want the light, like I don't want to have that Pavlovian response of, oh, it's gray, something intense is about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I don't want that Pavlovian effect. And now again, this first episode, so that may just be, you know, sort of a cause and effect of this episode
Mm-hmm.
being just that, and in the future it's not relevant. But you know, it's definitely something I will be keeping an eye on going forward, which feels like such a Sean thing to say. Like I feel like this is a point he'd be making, but like to me anyway, it just felt like it, you know. And
So, uh, Sean, you mentioned I'm actually this is going to be a cool follow up slash counterpoint possibility. I think you mentioned that the episode grew on you as it progressed. Obviously, the dancing sequence is one of the final ones before Duncan returns to the campsite and encounters Egg for the second time. So this is towards the tail end of the episode, and you said that as it progressed, it grew on you. Is it safe to assume that you had a different viewing experience of the stuff in Lionel's tent, in particular the dancing?
Just so we're clear, that is what you're referring to, right, Johnny? The stuff in Lionel's tent?
yeah, the dancing in the tent.
Yeah. Are you out of your fucking mind? Like that was the best part of, sorry, I'm spoiling my best scene here and I'm gonna cheat. The entire sequence from the second that Dunk goes in that tent to the last time we see him is far and away, last time we see him in the tent specifically, the strongest sequence of the entire episode, dancing included. Uh, there was so much character exposition there, just in the way they were acting and what they were doing, and like friggin', I think it's Daniel Ings playing Lionel Baratheon. Um, he was incredible. Like, holy crap! And the making of tells you who they based the character off of, at least for the television show. I thought it was amazing from start to finish. I don't know how the rest of you guys feel. And Johnny's talking about the dancing in particular, but I'm talking like the whole thing together as one sequence, from him, you know, seeing the big piece of meat and mowing down on it, probably the best food he's eaten in maybe ever,
Probably.
to him being called up to the table and, you know, why are you here? And for supper, and like I thought it was all about to go to hell. Perhaps he is just like, you know what, that actually makes sense. Like it would that right. I didn't care for him hitting his fucking head off the door twice. That felt the second time. I was like, okay, this is too Jar Jar Binks for me. But
Mm-hmm.
the comedy that happens in that tent and the timing of it, perfection on the highest level that Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon ever is. Far and away my favorite sequence. So the whole recording, Johnny and I in agreement at the beginning of this episode, has gone out the window. What else is there?
I'll break it down like specifically. Like, the dancing sequence up until he stomps on the foot, and I'd say about, you know, 30 seconds after that, I'm okay with it. Everything after that until they stop dancing, there's too much dancing. But like
So
everything
the
around it, I don't disagree with anything you said.
so the lead up to it, and then them trying to stomp on each other's foot, which is like basically a swordsman's technique. If you're going at each other with lances, it's about pacing, it's about footwork, it's about technique as much as it is actual dancing. But once he actually gets a foot stomped, then you're saying the montage could have gone for 30 seconds to a minute instead of the 3 or 4 that it felt
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. I mean, like that's like everything around like the build up to the moment where he stomps on the foot was important because like to me that was sort of the peak. That was him. I don't want to say realizing himself, but like that was the first time we got to see a knight, like a real genuine knight. And the build up to it was great. The stuff that came after it, like just like once it became a montage moment, then it's just like, okay, that's enough of the montage. Let's go to what's next. Like that's enough of this. We've gotten the point of the dancing. Let's move on.
I'll throw it to the tiebreaker, Randy. What's your take on the scene in the tent and how it relates to the episode and to the dancing sequence?
So I have to agree with Sean that it was my favorite scene as well, because I liked how it showcased the personalities of the characters and the potential for how where their growth is going to go. I really enjoyed how Lionel really kind of got a feel for Duncan and really was able to kind of bring something out of him to kind of show that he does kind of have something there, but he's not quite sure. And I liked how just oafish and uncoordinated Duncan was with the dancing, because it showed just how inexperienced he was, even though he's a massive human being and is probably strong as hell. But that whole dance sequence showed that he can be taught, he can be trained. So it's like almost like foreshadowing in the future of certain things that are probably going to happen to him, that you can almost go back to like, you know what, I saw this kind of happening because of the dance. And then if obviously the talk afterwards where they're just playing off each other, I just overall I felt like it gave us an idea of who Lionel was, gave us more of an insight into Duncan, and just it showed us the world of what being a knight really was and what they kind of did after hours essentially. So it was just fun all around for me for that one.
Let me play a little trivia here with you guys for a second. I mentioned the TV character anyway is based off of two movie characters. Or yeah, two movie characters, not actors. Do you guys want to take one guess each on who they might be? I think one's really obvious, but the other one might not be.
Movie characters, not existing characters within the show.
Movie characters, that's right. Yeah, they're based off two movie characters that have nothing to do with Game of Thrones.
See, because a lot of the speculation that I saw was that he was trying to hybrid his character off of like some of the charisma of Renly, but some of the power of Robert.
Oh, that could
Which
be there too. I'm just
I
mentioning what they
I
mentioned.
I see that, but as far as movie characters goes, I don't know if I have a clue.
Johnny, Randy?
Not specifically. The only thing I got out of him was by the end of that, I was calling him Sir Tyrion the Tall.
He does have a weird resemblance to
Just a little
The
bit.
Peter Dinklage and
pointed chin,
Oscar
yeah.
Isaac.
It just like that. That's sort of what threw. Like, I didn't get anything other than that. Like, my brain was just like, this is Tyrion at 6 feet, and it was just like,
I mean, he'd probably dance like Tyrion would probably dance like that too if he was 6 foot tall. So, honestly, thing is like I watched the thing after the show, and it was only the 6 minute one, so it wasn't like the full 18 minutes. So I didn't. It's so unfortunately I can't think of the movie characters that were referenced within him.
I mean, I'll take a stab and say Maverick from Top Gun.
No, not one of the characters.
Okay.
And they were letting all the people that were auditioning for the role know this too, so they had an idea what to present. The first is Jack Sparrow Pirates of the Caribbean. The second is Ernest, believe it or not.
Ernest P. Worrell?
You know, all the Ernest movies.
Yeah, that's Ernest P.
Yeah, the
Worrell.
quote Ernest. Yeah.
So I can see Captain Jack, but Ernest.
Oh, he full on Johnny Depp's it during the dancing. You could have dressed him up as Jack Sparrow and said that's the same character.
But I guess if he's gonna go for that goofiness, I guess I could see Ernest in that with some of the goofy shit he did.
I was surprised with that one.
Yeah, I don't know how much I see it, but I kind of see the Jack Sparrow. But I don't know if I
see the Jack Sparrow. I'll give you that one. Like I can definitely. Yeah, okay, that tracks. Ernest, I don't know, man.
Baffling.
Anyone who might have liked Daniel's performance last night, or maybe you didn't, but if you did and you're a Star Wars fan, good news. He's actually one of the main cast characters for Star Wars Starfighter.
That's good to know.
That is good to know.
Unless they misuse him like Gwendolyn Christie, so Zach's still not over that one.
Yeah,
I'm sure we can talk about that in Flixbusters next week.
One of my upcoming audiobooks I'm going to listen to is the Phasma book, and I'm sure
I still need to do that one.
I'm going to get more pissed off after listening to that one too. So yeah. Sean and Randy kind of gave their favorite scenes. That was going to be one of our topics of the evening. Johnny, what was your favorite scene from the episode, if any?
I think for me, my favorite scene was probably after Dunk got back to his camp with Egg. You know, getting to see them interact in that way, I think was good. I liked it. You know, mostly because that's the relationship this whole thing is built off of, right? As good as the other stuff was, and like, you know, the scene in the Baratheon tent was great. It was a great sequence. Just the dancing on a little long in the tooth. I think everything else in it was great, but you know, that's a me thing. But like everything with Duncan Egg in the camp there at the end, with you know him setting it up and the discussion of the you know the tent and the stars and all that, and you know the shooting star and all that, like it just you got to see their chemistry in a much more vivid way compared to when they were together earlier. So I am excited for that because I definitely think their chemistry was one of the most important things in this episode and also one of the best things in this episode. So, you know, for me, the best scene was the camp at the end.
I'm going to reference Star Wars again, and I don't know how many people this is going to latch on to possibly, but who's read Dark Disciple? Has anybody read Dark Disciple?
It's really long time ago when it first
really
came out.
good. Yeah. It's really good. In the first part of the book, Quinlan Vos is just trying to cross paths with Asajj Ventress, and he annoys the hell out of her, but he makes a really good first impression. And then as the book progresses, they become inseparable. But the first impressions were not great. I have a feeling that the stuff at the inn probably wasn't the best impression for Sir Duncan, especially given his mental state, the place that he was. He was thinking more about the tournament. He was thinking more about, you know, what his next steps are. He was not thinking about a squire. But by the time we get to that scene that you're talking about, Johnny, I think he's lived a little bit of life. He's experienced and made a few connections. He feels like, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can do this thing. And then he makes it back, and all of these things have been done for him that he usually does. The fire has been made, and there is some food that's cooking on the fire. The horses have been brushed. The area has been cleared. Those are all things that he probably had to do for Sir Arlen not even a week ago. And now it's being done for him instead of by him. And I think that has to be a really cool feeling as well, is to know that there's somebody out there that's willing to do those things for you, whether they like traditionally care about you or not, in the strictest sense. Um, but I think at that point, Egg starts to grow on him the way that Quinlan was kind of growing on Asajj in Dark Disciple. So it'll be fun to see how that dynamic plays out. Before we go to our favorite character and our final thoughts, are there any other scenes that you guys want to make mention of? I know there's only about 40 minutes of content here, and we've touched on, I guess, 3 of them at this point, but there's only about 5 or 6 to choose from. Are there any other things that you feel like are specifically worth mentioning before we move on?
I thought Johnny brought it up. I thought it was the end scene. Yeah, that would have been my second favorite scene. The just right from the moment Dunk sees Egg again, it just the chemistry was natural. It was good. It was um, very much felt more like this much older brother to a much younger brother type feeling, which hits home to me because my 2 boys have an 11-year gap between them. Obviously, this is an even bigger gap, but it yeah, I don't have any other scene other than that one. I will mention this though. During that scene, it kind of dawned on me, and it was like, okay, so when you think about it, it really is the perfect show to do in between House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. One, for cost saving reasons, and to be able to turn it around quicker. But two, like, think about it this way: there are young people in House of the Dragon, probably between the age of babies and small children, that are still alive during this. Now they're old, just like Aemon was in Game of Thrones. But then I thought about Aemon. It's like, well, yeah, there's Aemon too, because you know, spoiler alert here. If I mean, hey, it's not my fault if you didn't pay attention during Game of Thrones. Um, Aegon, Egg people, is Aemon's older brother. Pardon me. Aemon. I think I keep saying Aemon. I meant Aemon. Is it Aemon? Aemon? Maester Aemon, Game of
Yeah.
Thrones, anyways. He's the younger brother to Egg from Dunk and Egg.
Older.
Older? I thought it was younger.
No, he's older.
So, like, just the idea that there's still technically people alive from both shows that can be present in this show is kind of cool. It's very few, but it's nice connective tissue that way.
Yeah, according to a quick Google search, Aemon's about 2 years older than
That's why the council.
than Aegon.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if he was younger or older. I thought he was younger, so that's my bad.
Aegon was the fourth son of the fourth son.
It's hard to keep up with the Targaryens sometimes.
Valid.
They're active.
Active. Yeah, they didn't have TV. They didn't have TV back then, so they had to make their own point.
They got bored.
Randy, Johnny, any other scenes worth mentioning before we go to favorite character?
No, I mean I agree with Sean that the end there was definitely the runner-up in terms of like favorite scenes. I like the simplicity of it. I feel like
No more.
they feel like the just the feel of it and how I mean I enjoyed looking up at the night sky. Like I thought all that stuff was just well done, and it just felt like there was that connection there, like you guys have been saying, and yeah, it was just a really good bonding moment, and I felt that it served its purpose to be a good endpoint, considering probably what's going to happen moving forward. All things considered, with the shortness of the run times and all the stuff they got to get you caught up on, and all the things the characters have to get caught up on. So it was a nice, slow, deliberate end before the shit hits the fan, so to speak.
Johnny?
No, I mean, I think between those two scenes, we kind of have the most important stuff covered. Yeah.
As someone who has read the source material, I will say that there is one more scene in particular that is fairly important, and that is his brief encounter with Manfred Dondarrion, who says that he will not vouch for him because the tournament is tomorrow, based in real time. The tournament starts in the morning, and unless Lionel can remember him from his drunken state the night before, he still has no sponsor. He still has no one who will vouch for him to even compete in the tourneys. And so, Lionel remembering him and Manfred rejecting him are going to be two key components of the storyline moving forward. So just be on the lookout for that. Let's talk about favorite character. You kind of only got two to choose from, unless you want to choose Lionel. So I guess it's a possibility of three, depending on if you want to be really out there and choose one of the hookers or something who did the plot exposition for us. But that's not very likely. Sean, who was your favorite character of this first episode?
So yeah, I really do think it has to be between three. Really, maybe I forget his name, but he had a little bit of impact there. Dondarrion Squire there. Can't remember his name, but I thought he was somewhat entertaining. And like I said, Duncan Egg got great chemistry, but I'm going with Lionel. The fucking charisma that guy oozes from the second he appears on screen to the last time we see him is just like amazing. Like, and Daniel Ings is a somewhat fairly well-known actor, but like he's not a star per se. I think this has the potential, unless he dies next episode. Who knows? I don't know. To at the very least, a big-time stand-up performance. I thought he was incredible. I still think it would have been good without him, but like for me, he took the episode from being just good to really, really good.
Okay, one vote for Lionel. Randy, how about you?
Let's be honest here. I think once Sean saw the Captain Jack Sparrow in him, that was all he needed. So, but for me, it's going to be Duncan, just because I like that he feels like a good person. Because you could sit there and see, like, just through the, whether it's, House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones, people will do acts of kindness, but they're still a piece of shit. Whereas Duncan genuinely feels like a good person trapped in a world where he's going to have to learn the hard way. And I'm really curious and excited about the character growth we're going to see out of him as he learns and takes his lumps. Obviously, I could have chosen Lionel as well, just because the charisma's there and he's a lot of fun. And I feel like he does have to play a role in all this. But ultimately for me, it's just Dunk because of the potential for the character growth and the fact that, like I said, he's genuinely a good person in the Game of Thrones world, and that is hard to come by.
Yeah, everybody's got like a moral gray area, but Duncan waving his sword around in the meadow, yelling out, "Stop raping, sir!" kind of gives you
That was funny. Yeah.
it gives you an idea of who he is and what he stands for. So yeah, I think Duncan probably gets the vote for me as well. But it's tough because I feel like Egg is going to grow on me once he gets more scenes. So this was definitely Duncan's story. It was Duncan's POV. I'll be curious to see if future episodes like send them on separate adventures and you see things from Dunk's point of view and then you cut and you see things from Egg's point of view. I think if that happens, then Egg might grow on me a bit. Johnny, how about you?
Well, I think you're all forgetting the white horse with the sass. No, I mean seriously though, it's Dunk. Yeah, he's really the only one who gets a lot of character building in this episode. Um, Although I have to say, if they do one more of the "I get it, you're tall" jokes, I may have to start knocking points off for creativity. Um, I can only watch the man hit his head on so many door frames before that joke gets tired. And I think we're past that point after one episode. So, other than that, I don't have anything necessarily bad to say. We'll get more in the future. I think if we'd have seen more of Egg in this episode, he would have definitely been a contender. But, you know, I think there's definitely a lot of layers to that character that we will get to see going forward that you kind of got a glimpse of in different points of this. But it's Dunk just because he was the one we saw in 99% of the episode.
I thought the little screen time that Egg got, I thought he was phenomenal. Hard to ask him what
Yeah.
about a young kid like that.
Oh yeah, couldn't ask him to do more or do better. He just didn't have a lot to work with.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's not an issue of quality; it's an issue of quantity.
Quantity. Yep. And I've heard that so many times before. Let's go to final thoughts, and then are we still doing scores for this episode, Sean? Because I know we
Yeah,
weren't.
but let's just give it out of 10.
We'll
I don't
just-
have a graphic ready, so.
Okay. I mean, I did put my numbers together, and it came out to a pretty even number, anyways. But that's fine. We can do that. We'll go around the horn and do final thoughts and scores out of 10 for this first episode. Let's go in reverse, Johnny. Why don't you kick us off?
Geez, I thought I was gonna have more time to do the actual math to figure out my score. Because I also did the actual math. So
like the planet score, not the planet score. That's IPC. The Flixbuster score.
I mean, I kind of did the quick math, and my rating was 74 out of 100. So
okay, just 7.4 out of 10.
7.4. Yeah, I mean,
sure. We'll divide all that by 10.
That's
Why not?
Where, simple math there. I did the
Mhm.
Flixbuster score, everything out of 20, easy math there.
Mhm.
So 74 out of 100, 7.4 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Randy, thoughts and scores.
So, like I said, going into this blind, I just keeping an open mind. I wanted to just kind of feel the characters out, and I really enjoyed what I saw. Obviously, it wasn't perfect by any means, and I really wasn't prepared for a more of a comical tone for the episode. But it wasn't unwelcome. I think that actually helps add to something that we don't normally see in Game of Thrones. I think it helps it stand out and separate itself from it, which is a good thing, because we want to be able to remember these characters, these shows for what they are, and not feel like, well, it just kind of all blurs together. So this really did that for me. It kind of helped it stand out in that respect. Obviously, I will do the same, and I figured out my scores for the Flixbuster segment, and it ended up being an 81 out of 100. So we'll go with an 8.1 for my overall score for the premiere episode.
Dang, I'm starting to wonder if I need to revisit my math. Sean, what about you?
I do believe the Flixbusters method of figuring out the score still works for this, and you just break it down. I'm going with a 7.5. I wish I could give it like a solid 8. I still think 7.5 is a good score. But I got to take some points away for the shit, and just the first 10 minutes in general.
So when I was doing the planet scores, I was like crossing this number out and crossing this number out and putting a new number in, and was like, what did I think about this? Maybe a little bit higher here, maybe a little bit lower here. But the production, and I know it's a lower budget, but the production value is definitely lower. They definitely spent less in order to make it feel more down to earth and more grungy, as you will. But the production value is not what Game of Thrones usually is. Look at the Winterfell behind me. We don't get anything like that. We get maybe one far off distant shot of King's Landing during a flashback, and that's it. There's hardly anything that has to do with anything grand. And so there were definitely some points that were taken off for production. And there wasn't anything spectacular about the sound for me. I didn't think there was anything that stood out about the sound design. I didn't think there was anything that really stood out about the music, in spite of it being an original score. So there were some points taken off there. And then all of my other thoughts, story, acting, enjoyment, they were all slightly above average, but none of that really pulled the points that were deducted in the other categories, if that makes sense. So it all balances out to an even 70 out of 100 or a 7 out of 10, which, again, like you said, Sean, it's solid. It's not in the 60s, but I guess it'll be an adjustment period. And I do think that there is some cooler, better stuff on the horizon. But it was an episode. It was New Thrones, and that was cool. But I'm also not going to let recency bias get the better of me. And I'm not saying that y'all did. It's just I'm I'm gonna wait and see, because I think it has the potential to be better, but I don't think it has the potential to be like a 90, 95 out of 100 either. So I've got to give it room to breathe from 70 up to like that 80, maybe 85 region, because I think that might be the peak for this show.
I think 7 out of 10 is a good score. Considering I think all your points are pretty spot on. And I mean, it's a lot better score than you gave The Last Jedi, which we'll get into next week.
Well, and the nice thing is that between the four of us, it's a 7.5 overall average score. So that's still pretty damn good.
7.5 is like a 75%. The popcorn meter on Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 79. So that's pretty decent. The tomato meter, from the professional reviewers, have it listed at 88%. So this seems to be a fairly well received initial episode, and there's definitely a lot to look forward to. And we're going to be reviewing every episode here on the podcast. So next week we'll be talking episode 2, and then 3 and 4, and so on until the season's over. And then we'll do retrospectives and maybe top 5 favorite characters, top 5 favorite moments. You're in for another dozen episodes of this, even after the show's over, just because of how in-depth we get sometimes. So hit that follow button. You don't want to miss any of it. Let's go into some other Westerosi content before we call it a night. Sean, you've got something about a Jon Snow plot details being revealed. I haven't seen anything of this, so please enlighten us if you would.
Yeah, I believe it was the Hollywood Reporter or Deadline or somewhere reputable came out with what happened, and it was a follow-up because now we know there is a definitive, not just a small spin-off, but like they are trying to make a Game of Thrones sequel show. And it's not imminent, you're probably 3 or 4 years away from it. But they're trying, they've basically begun development, and 2 characters that they want a part of that show are Arya Stark and Jon Snow. They've already even hired someone who's writing too. So it's not like they're just throwing some ideas around at the table. They're going ahead with this. Problem is, Kit Harington recently said that he wants nothing to do with the character or the show anymore. And I know he had some mental health challenges towards the end of filming and had to go through therapy. But there's a level of, probably butthurtness in here too, because as we know, he was in development for, I believe, almost 2 years on a Jon Snow limited series, which would have been 6 to 8 episodes. And ultimately, HBO and George R. R. Martin decided, no, this isn't going to work. And the reason why? Well, I'm siding with George R. R. Martin and HBO on this one. The show was essentially just Jon Snow Beyond the Wall. Never comes back down below the wall, never goes anywhere else. He's dealing with massive PTSD from killing Danny and, decisions that he made, to a point where he hasn't had any children or anything. He builds homes and then burns them down. He likes to watch them on fire. Um, and he basically rinses, and repeats the same thing. He's abandoned Longclaw. And obviously, there's some small little story towards the end, which they don't get into details about. Maybe they want to repurpose some of it. I don't know. But obviously, Obi-Wan Kenobi style, he finds himself a little bit towards the end for one final mission of some sort, which they give no details on, other than Kit Harington was adamant that the character had to die. And they just could not bridge any gap there creatively to get on the same page with HBO and George R. R. Martin. And you would think you would have an idea which direction you're going prior to that, so that you don't waste 2 years, building up a show that doesn't get made. But given that little bit of information they revealed in the last week, I'm glad it didn't get made, because I'm going to sound so cringe when I say this, but that's not my Jon Snow.
Screw the cringe, man. Just the idea, just the treatment or whatever they did, it sounds god awful. And I'm not like, going, it's not my Jon Snow. I'm literally going, no, this would absolutely suck if it got made.
Apparently HBO found it, the word that's quoted is too bleak. No shit.
Yeah, that's too much. Like, I can understand him being, full of regret, and I can understand him having troubles, having issues, but the whole time that you were describing it, it was giving me Kenobi vibes. And I was like, man, I would not want my Game of Thrones show to stoop to the level of quality and storytelling that Kenobi did. So it hell must have frozen over someplace, because I agree with George R. R. Martin for once.
Yeah, I'm with you. What about you, Johnny?
I personally, I was always in the camp of, I don't need a sequel series. Again, like I said, I make no bones, I was burned on the end of the final season. It burned me out. And I don't care. I didn't care. I still don't. Hearing about it, I'm glad, because like that would have taken the last little
To be
bit.
clear, that would have just been a Jon Snow spinoff, not their intention for whatever the sequel
No,
series
but
is.
even still, like, following up with that would have, taken every bit of burned ashes from the original series and just, it defecated on it like Dunk did at the beginning of that episode tonight, this week. Like, I have zero interest in that story. That story is garbage. That isn't a story. Like, so I'm glad it didn't come to fruition. I'm glad it didn't exist. And I am thankful to say, if it did, I would probably not be here tonight talking about this episode, because I would have zero interest in anything Game of Thrones related, period, after that. Because it would just, I'd have been done. Like,
Let's be honest, if you're not done after The Rise of Skywalker, you're not done.
well, thankfully, there's enough outside material to keep me interested there.
So, Johnny, let me ask you this.
Hmm?
Would you rather see the pilot of the new Jon Snow spinoff, as Sean just described, or would you rather watch Dunk have IBS for 45 minutes?
I would rather
Oh
watch
my
Dunk sleep behind
God.
a tree for 45 minutes. Because at least then I'd have no character expectations. It would just be great. This guy can't control his food. Okay, that's fine. 45 minutes on a shitter. I've done that before. That's believable.
Same.
Just the fact that, like, really it would have only featured Jon Snow. They mentioned Tormund, and they said a couple other characters would have popped up, and his wife would have been involved, and that he's having hallucinations from the PTSD. It very much felt kind of like the Miguel Sapochnik thing that happened on House of the Dragon season 1, where it's like, obviously, I think, is it Rosalie or Rose or something like that? I don't know. Kit Harington's wife, who played. Help me out here, Zach.
Egret.
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 That's it. Yes. Um, very much felt like, let's get my family in here and get them involved. And like, do we really need to see him hallucinating about Egret while being depressed about killing Danny? Like, I'm, yeah, I'm with George R. R. Martin on this one. This was a hard no, and something tells me, other than throwing the bag at Kit Harington, it might be a really, hard time getting him back on board if he's that stubborn to work with.
I mean, it was
It
a smart decision because it probably would have killed any goodwill Game of Thrones had left with the fans, because that series just isn't, it's kind of like that whole thing of like, this isn't something I wanted. I mean, granted, we get that a lot with a lot of different IPs, but this, just the sound of it really potentially feels like it could have just killed any interest in Game of Thrones at all after that. And that's saying something when you think about how popular it still is.
makes you
Not
wonder.
just. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it makes you wonder how bad the long night must have been.
They spent a lot of fucking money on that thing and even filmed the pilot and said no. I still hope that one day it's just like, it's a throw on some fucking big ass 4K or 8K box set at this point. I would love to watch the first episode of that. Zach's
Well,
probably dying for the Jon Snow show. He loves fucking zombies and Velocipaster and all that shit. He would have loved picking that.
I think I would have watched Dunk take a shit.
Not Jon Snow,
That
true heir to the Iron Throne, but Jon Snow, the arson.
that was such a bad prop. You could tell that wasn't an actual bare ass, and they were just like squirting liquid brownie mix out of it or something. Like that was probably one of the worst props I've seen in a while, because he's just hiding behind a fake tree and sticking his front half out. They've got the little ass appendage out the other side, and somebody's using like some sort of a squirt gun.
I
Like,
think that might have offended me more, if I'm being honest.
I've seen more realistic shits and diarrhea dumps and angry video game nerd videos than that was.
and that, yeah, and the noises were gratuitous as well. So yeah, that was zombies level bad as far as props and graphics goes. But speaking of movies, Sean, you have caught wind that there may be a Game of Thrones feature length film that comes around at some point, rather than a limited series, or it could be one or the other. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so this is another one that was covered on one of the main trades. Is actually, I think it was straight out of George R. R. Martin's mouth. And that is, so we know Mattson Tomlin, who is the co-writer on the Batman and the Batman Part 2 with Matt Reeves, is doing something in relation to Egg on the Conqueror. We believe it's a limited series. However, what they've done is, I guess, Warner Brothers, I don't know who their parent company is anymore, but really, they heard the idea and they asked them to also develop it as like this big blockbuster Dune-like movie. And it's Egg on the Conqueror. You think Valerian the Black Dread. You think about
The Fall of Old Valyria.
yes, like I always thought that show should start with like a little 5-minute thing of that, but like you give us a friggin' 3-hour movie the size of Dune, have the first half an hour start with the Fall of Valyria, everything going to hell like that. If they're really willing to take the risk and put that kind of money into it, I would fucking love to see it on the big screen. But oddly enough, they're developing the same project with the same people involved 2 different ways, one for the small screen and one for the big screen. So they seem one way or another dead set on delivering this.
Which would you guys rather see, Randy? Would you rather see a feature length Aegon film in a theater, or are we too used to having Game of Thrones in serial format?
It'd be cool to see it in the theater. The real question is are other fans ready for something like that? It's not like with Star Wars, it started in the theater and then we've gone to the small screen and now we're going back to the theater again. But with this, it's very going to be very different. Um, I feel like it could work. I mean, we've seen the success of what they did with, even though it was the final episode with the series finale for Stranger Things. Obviously, from what I understand, it did pretty well in theaters. But still, the idea of a movie, it could work. But to me personally, I'll take the series just because I feel like that way you can make it can breathe a little bit more and pile in a little more information. We don't that way because if you think about the amount of what would go into that to try to pile it all into like 2.5, 3 hours or longer, that's a lot to ask. Uh, I feel like if you're going for just story and trying to get as much information as possible, the easiest way to do it is just have it to be a series.
Yeah, I mean, it could suffer from Mandalorian and Grogu syndrome, where it's like, oh, you're trying to fit a few episodes of this thing into one feature length thing instead of taking your time and letting it all play out. Um, that's probably a different conversation for a different time, though. Johnny, would you rather see Aegon as a full length film or as a series?
That's a tough one. Um, I think personally, I think series. I think jumping a television product to the big screen is harder than we make it sound sometimes. I think that most of the audience has sort of grown accustomed to how they partake of Game of Thrones. That going from one to the other would be awkward. Like I think the prime example would be um El Camino was the Breaking Bad movie. Like I think that's sort of what could happen here. You take a great television product and you make a movie out of it, and it just doesn't do good. It doesn't do well. So like I think for me anyway, I think a series would be better. I think obviously you'd have to put money behind it because it would be a much more intensive time period. Being the fall of Valyria and having Aegon and the time of dragons and all of those things would be such that you would require a more cost intense thing. So I could see it being a limited series, but I just don't see a movie necessarily working. Could it? Sure. But at the same time, I just don't know how intensely the audience would go for it. I mean, especially from a time point standpoint. Just from the fact that I think by the time we see this come to fruition, even if they went into production today, by the time the movie would come out, would probably be in a post WB buyout time period.
Yeah, right. It'd be a
Um,
couple of years at the earliest, and if they're doing
so
it with
like
Valeria, that's gonna be massive
uh,
CG.
exactly. So like it would be in a time period of, let's just assume things end the way they do now, and it is Netflix that gets WB, and from what it sounds like now, they're looking at they're saying you're guaranteed 45-day window for theatrical release, and then Netflix, which if you're not a blockbuster movie isn't a bad thing. Um, but I think a lot of the audience would I'm just gonna wait. It's 45 days, and then I'll watch it on Netflix. So especially for something that you are accustomed to watching from the comfort of your own home. It's Yeah, I think a series
I
is
mean,
the best option personally.
I've got a really nice TV. We've got like a good sound bar and then like a subwoofer that's in the other side of the room, so it kind of provides a little bit of a surround sound. I'm totally fine with something serialized
Mhm.
that's cinematic quality because then I don't have to go buy a ticket. I've already got pretty much everything that I need already, and I think when you give it more time to breathe, like you said, then you have less rush and you feel
Mhm.
like they're telling the story that's meant to be told instead of the one that they need to tell for the sake of the film. So yeah, I think streaming's kind of the way to go. What platform it'll end up on, TBD. But one other piece of news to talk about before we call it a night, and it's not really news. It's more like, oh, this old chestnut again. Apparently, GRRM has had some new things to say about Condal and the rest of the House of the Dragon cast and the people that are involved in it. Um, Sean, can you provide some details on that for us? Because I don't know if I've got the official statement on hand, but essentially, whoa, we see his hair. Hello. Can you provide a little bit of insights as to what the latest shit that came out of his mouth was?
Yeah, he just said, and I don't think he needed to answer it this way, but he's like, he was asked about his relationship with Ryan Condal, showrunner of House of the Dragon. And if people paid attention to the credits, he's an executive producer on this as well, despite not being involved with any of the public online marketing or in-person marketing going on. And George R. R. Martin replies with, "Yeah, it's abysmal. Couldn't be worse." And we heard he was upset that they went away from some of the things he wanted for House of the Dragon season two. Uh, he was upset with the lack of communication. Apparently, it got so bad that the only way they could communicate is if um, basically they're at so bad of odds with one another's that they have to have someone from HBO be the middle person because they will go around one another or talk to one another. And I never want to say the common denominator thing because it's not always that way. But like George had these same problems at the end of Game of Thrones. He's having it now. I know he had it with the Blood Moon thing. Um, like I think people forget this guy was paid truckloads of money for the rights to his stuff that WB can now make, with or without his approval at this point. Um, is it great to have the guy who's your source material be there to sign off on some stuff? Yeah, for sure. Would it be good to be on talking terms? I think, yeah, definitely. But the second you buy that from him, it's no longer like they don't have to make it
It's not yours.
exactly how you want them to make it.
It's not yours
It's
anymore.
yeah, like I'm not saying necessarily butt the fuck out, but like get over it. You sign the papers, right? Like this is the way it works. And
You're
on top of
living the
that,
life you're living now. You have the house that you have now. You go to the concerts that you go to now. You get to see your product on the screen the way you do now because your signature's on the dotted fucking line.
that's
I
right.
I think we can all agree here that he just needs to take a page out of George Lucas's book and just enjoy your money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. But instead, he gets butt hurt. He goes public with it. That creates bad PR all around for everybody involved on all these shows, really, and all the future shows that are likely to come, unless ratings finally decide to tank. Um, and it's a bad look. Like at the end of the day, what did you want them to do? George R. R. Martin goes on all the time about how Game of Thrones should have gone 12 or 13 seasons. They couldn't, George. You've been working on a book for 2 fucking decades that's never going to come out. Like You wanted them to just fucking work off of bullet points and their own shit for the next fucking 6 years? And then with House of the Dragon, like there's not a lot there. There's not a TV show worth of material written in those books, or
There's not a
specifically in
TV
that one
show
book.
worth of material for a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms either. It could have been a movie.
Yeah, and from what I understand, my favorite sequence in there isn't even really in the novella, not the way it's presented in the TV show, or at least that's what they talked about in the making of. And
No,
it's
not really.
like,
But
dude, making a TV show is not the same as writing a book.
the prostitute exposition and the taking a shit isn't in the novella either, just so you know.
Gotcha.
I mean, I assume shits were taken in the novella. They just happened off screen.
Well, I'm sure shits get taken all the time. You just don't have to go into graphic detail the way the show did.
I just want, like, if he's there as a consultant, great. You know, the fact that they're staying a little more true to his vision on this show, cool. But like, they've already went and said officially on their own documentary that, yeah, no, we're having to add stuff. There's not enough material here to do this many episodes at this length. And it's like, the guy just doesn't fucking get it. Brilliant writer, but doesn't get it.
But he needs to make like the Steve Miller Band and just take the money and run.
I think to me,
take the money and run.
I think at least a little bit of the problem is that you know how outspoken he is. You know, and this is just from an HBO standpoint. You keep letting the camel in the tent. You know, like you keep bringing the rooster onto the farm and expecting him not to crow every morning.
Hey camel,
You
what
know?
the fuck are you doing in
Like,
here? Get out!
It's in his nature when you
Stop
start
drinking my water.
You know, when the story starts getting away from the one he created, because let's be honest, as the author, he has the ownership of the material, like in that, you know, personal sense. And, you know, and that's a great thing to have. I'll say it. I've said it before. I think George is an amazing, you know, world builder, but I think he's a terrible writer. I personally have a hard time reading the novels because I just don't like the style he uses to narrate the books. You know, and that's me. I don't, you know, I think the world he's built is phenomenal, but his actual writing is rough. But, you know, you keep bringing him in on these projects and letting him have, you know, that ownership of the material and using his material in such a way that, you know, he keeps feeling that pride in it, that when you start getting away from it, and he's a very vocal about that. And, you know, it's like, it's reached a point now where it is the opposite of George Lucas, because, you know, George, obviously, he just took the money and said, have fun. You know, they didn't keep bringing George in and being like, well, what do you think we should be doing? You know, help us game plan out the next sequel series. And then, you know, well, here's episode 7, how it would have been. And then you do it. And then, okay, 8 and 9, we're just going to go in a totally different direction. You know, I'm sure at that point, George might have some things to, and by that, I mean, Lucas might have some things to say that aren't, you know, quite nice. But they never did that. They never brought him in. He walked away, took his money, and, you know, he counted his shekels, which is the smart thing to do when you sell material like that. So, like, I don't know. It's the point to me personally when I see a headline or a story or something that's like, George R.R. Martin says, and if the headline is not followed up by George R.R. Martin says Winds of Winter to be released in 2026, I stop reading. Because I stop caring.
You're going to be waiting a while, buddy.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I know that. I know that the book will not come out before he dies, and when it does come out, it will be because the publisher hired a writer to finish it.
He also said in this past week, Zach's popular theory is he would release it once he's dead, and I guess other people had it as a really popular theory. And he went on again about fans talking about his death and how he doesn't intend to die anytime soon, and just so everyone's aware, there's no, you know, release plan if if he dies before Winds of Winter's done, it won't come out. He's like, so either I
I'm
live to
sure
write it
glad
or
he
it doesn't
thinks
come
that.
out. And
The publisher will hire somebody to finish it, and it'll come out.
well, the publisher hasn't done fucking
I-
shit to get him to release it.
Well, I think that's
Guys,
because he's still alive.
my theory is not just that it'll come out after he's dead. My theory is he's finished. My theory is he's written it. It's done. It's ready for publication, but he doesn't want the vitriol. He doesn't want the hate. He doesn't want the criticism. So he's not going to have it published until after he's gone. That's the only reason I can see him being this involved in this many projects is because he doesn't have another project to work on. The man's fucking bored. That's why he's bitching about every single thing that's being put out there on broadcasts and streamers is he doesn't have a project he's currently on. He's
You
finished
nailed
Winds
that.
of Winter. He's
He said-
finished Winds of Winter. And
He said he's
wants something
uninspired
else
to
do.
continue.
Yeah, he's done, but he doesn't want the criticism. So he's not going to release anything until after he's gone. I'm sure he's got it written in his will to release the book because it's a lot harder to criticize a man from beyond the grave.
Also, if you're like he mentioned this, if you're hoping that this is going to be one book, I don't think it is. I think let's assume that he does release it, whether it's years from now or post his death. So one, he's apparently not finished if you're taking him at his word. But two, the thing's already between 1,100 and 1,200 pages long. His words, not speculative, his words. So if you're not finished at, let's say, almost 1,200 pages, how big's the fucking book? And is it going to be the Winds of Winter Part 1, the Winds of Winter Part 2, the Winds of Winter Part 3? Because I could fucking see it being that way just for a fucking money grab. Is there a normal sized novel that is one book that is 12, 13, 1,400 pages? I don't know if there is.
The Bible.
Maybe War and Peace. I mean, I have a couple books back there that are like 800-900 pages that I've read, but nothing that massive. That's ridiculous.
I mean, Order of the Phoenix was 800 plus pages. Now it was the longest book in the Potter series. I can definitely believe George would have something that's 200 pages longer than that.
400.
Well, I'm just saying to get to 1,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still think it's gonna get. I still think it's gonna get released after he's gone, but it'll be a while before we find any of that out. Wait and see, I suppose.
I hope
Let's
so.
end
This
the
show
evening.
is going to end or he's going to have some very bad things said about it.
I just quickly Googled it. War and Pages is 1,400 pages. That is
War
the
and Peace?
longest. War and Peace, yes. It's 1,400 pages.
That's
Maybe
crazy.
George is going for the record.
It's
The record-
1,200 to 1,492, depending on font and translation.
The record for the longest piece of literature is an ongoing Pokemon fan fiction on Reddit.
Good lord.
Seriously?
Well,
Oh my god.
I would not be surprised if it is a fanfic that is, because I can speak from personal experience. I have read fanfics that are over 1 million words long.
Yeah, they are.
And how much of it did you write?
It's still being,
Not a damn word.
from what I understand, it's still being written, and it holds the record because it recycles old scenes as flashbacks. So stuff.
Well, when
that
you
was,
get far enough into a story, that makes sense.
So basically, it's just trying to One Piece a Pokemon story. Gotcha.
more or less. Let's end the episode on a high note, though. I don't want the podcast to be. There you go. Perfect. I don't want the podcast to be on a downer about George R.R. Martin. Let's finish it on a high note. Let's do hopes / predictions for episode 2 for next week's review. What do you think might happen, or what do you hope might happen in the second episode out of 6 here in the series? What should be the next progression in the story? What should be the next tale that gets told in Dunk and Egg's story? Anybody want to lead off?
I'll just say I obviously hope we get a little more of Egg. I think by episode 2 or 3, they're going to introduce some sort of physicalness to it, and we know there's, in terms of action and fighting, just from the trailer, we know there is action and fighting in season 1, decent bit of it. But give me more Dunk and Lionel. Like I said, I love their interactions, and I know we're going to get it to some extent because the behind the scenes stuff showed it. So
Okay.
I personally don't really have much in the way of expectation. Other than just
No
I
shitting.
want more. No shitting. That's an expectation that I have going forward. No more shit. Literally. Or at least give me a warning at the beginning of an episode. Caution, episode contents, literal shit. Yeah, just more Dunk and Egg. I want to see that relationship blossom a bit more. And I want to say establish more characters, but push the story forward, keep giving us more of what you've given us so far, and give us more action, less dancing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to really figure out exactly where we're going to go or what to hope for, considering it's such a short series and there's only 5 episodes left. It makes it real hard because now you got to make a choice on what type of character development you want to go with here. And obviously, for me, my hope is with whatever training they decide to do or fighting they decide to do, that in the process of it all, you know, I know it's not going to be. It's hard, like I said, it's hard to do per episode, but it's yeah, I think at this point, I hope for at least Dunk getting his first taste of victory, because I think that will help the character grow and kind of come out of his shell a little bit more, and we get to see more of the personality. And I guess that's what I can say is I hope we get to see his first victory, because that would be great for the character. Um, don't worry, Johnny. I'm sure there's going to be like, if there's anybody out there named Johnny who does not like to see shit, we want to warn you that there's a horse taking a shit, and also the pigs as well. So please avert your eyes.
Imagine if they did make like user specific disclaimers. Like when you're making a YouTube video, you can like put in whatever category you want the video to be a part of. You can put in like different categories of things that you don't like, and then in the disclaimer at the top of the episode, it'll be like, warning, this episode contains violent shitting or something like that.
Just think Minority Report with what they do in that movie, and I don't think it's that far off.
It's a possibility. As somebody who's seen the source material, I think it's interesting to see what they did accurately and what they did deviate with. And it was pretty spot on. And so aside from the gratuitous dancing, but he does have good encounters with Lionel Baratheon. And aside from the violent shitting, because I don't remember that in the book, but aside from that, the burying of Sir Arlen, the attempt to enter the tourney and being denied and needing a sponsor, the encounters with Egg at the inn and then again at the campsite, those are all things that are in the novella. Those are all things that are very accurately depicted in the novella. So it's encouraging to see that the things that are important are being included so far. So as somebody who was very annoyed with the Hobbit movies, I am just hoping that they stay on target. I hope that they stay within the confines of the story that needs to be told and don't extrapolate excessively like the third Hobbit movie did. If they can stay on target and continue to tell a accurate and worthwhile story, then I think I'll be happy at the end of the day. So stay on target, to quote episode 4. But yeah, this has been a fun review of the first episode of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. The second episode review will be happening around this time a week from today. But in the meantime, where can we keep up with all of y'all in that week span in between, Sean?
Nowhere. Not unless
Nowhere.
you're a NASCAR fan.
I'm not gonna be anywhere. You can't find me in no damn place, no way, no how.
That's right.
Well, fuck you too, Johnny.
Here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, see, we get nowhere and everywhere and everything all at once.
Gotta love that omnipresence.
Where do you fall in all of that, Randy?
Well, over on X, you can find me at Giggity Giles, and with the damn, the playoffs are almost over. It's crazy to think that we're so close to the Super Bowl. But anyway, if you enjoy people getting drunk, saying dumb shit, and just talking sports, you can Google Sports and Brew, and hopefully enjoy us getting something out here soon, because it's been too long, and I need to vent about the 49ers Seahawks game a little bit. And yeah.
Uh-oh.
I have some things I need to say, and damn it, I need to record so I can put it out there for everybody to hear me bitch, piss, and moan.
That's what this podcast is for me sometimes, so I get it. I have a new episode of the IPC podcast talking about our 5 most anticipated movies of the year. You can find that where your podcatchers are. You can find exclusive content for this channel at that link right up there, patreon.com/House of the Empire. All of our socials are available in places like the description or in our lower thirds, although I think Randy's and Johnny's may have gotten hidden by the clip art here tonight. But be sure to follow us on socials and keep up with whatever else is going on in between episodes. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, do all those things so that you're alerted for when new content is being scheduled, published, released, whatever. There's a lot of cool stuff happening here on this channel. There's a lot of cool stuff happening on the Patreon, and some cool stuff happening in our lives. I've ventured into the world of broadcasting basketball for the first time ever. So if you want to see me try my hand at hoops, you can follow me right there. But I do think that's going to do it for this episode of House of the Empire, talking about A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We'll be back here on the channel next week. But until then, for Sean and Johnny, I'm Randy. And Randy. I'm not Randy.
Wow, then who the hell am I?
I'm not
What the
Randy.
hell?
I'm not. No, I barely want my own life. For Sean and Johnny and Randy, I am Zach of House Stark. Thanking you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time when the Empire returns.